This video is going to be on factoring quadratics when a equals 1. So that means when you see an equation with like an x squared in it, that number in front of that x squared is going to be a 1. It's probably not even going to say it. It's just going to say x squared and then have the rest of the equation. There's going to be nothing with that x squared. Now, what we've been doing in class, we've been using this rhyme, and it seems to be helping a little bit. So if you want to write this down in your notes, factors of C, add to get B. Okay, so factors of C, add to get B. And that's a way, a pretty easy way to remember how to solve for this problem, or for these problems when you're having a factor. Now, first problem we're going to do, this is about as basic as it gets, this x squared plus 6x plus 8. We have all positives. Remember, all these examples we're going to be doing, there are no numbers in front of the x squared. It's just going to be that 1, right? There's that invisible 1. So the first thing you're going to do on all these problems is write your parentheses. Okay? You're going to have two parentheses. It's kind of like we're unfoiling. So when we foil, we do first, outer, inner, last, and then we get a pretty little equation like this. Well, we're undoing that. We're taking this pretty little equation, we're putting it back into those two parentheses. Another thing that both of these parentheses need is our variable. In our examples today, our variables are all going to be x's. So both of these parentheses get an x, because when you FOIL and you do the first, you multiply the first, you get x times x, which is always going to be x squared. Now remember our rhyme. Factors of C, add to get B. Okay, so we need the factors of 8. The factors of 8, and because this one is all positives, we know that both of our factors are going to be positive, because you can't multiply two negatives and add together to get a positive. It can't happen. So we have to figure out the factors of 8. So we'll have 1 and 8, and we'll have 2 and 4. So remember, factors of C add to get B. Well, which ones of those factors add to get 6? 2 and 4. That's it. It doesn't matter which order they go in. You can put plus 2 here, or you can put plus 2 here. It doesn't matter. They can go in whatever order they want. That is your whole answer. That's all you have to do. You set up your parentheses. You put your x's, or whatever variable you're working with. You factor C, and you see which of those factors add together to give you that B term. Okay. Now what I did here on this problem underneath is I changed it up a little bit. All I did is I changed that 6 to a negative 6. What does that do when we're factoring? What's that going to do to our problem? So everything is still exactly the same. We put our parentheses, we put our x's, and now we factor 8. Still looks exactly the same. The difference is now we have this negative on the inside for that b. That b is negative now. So in order to get a positive number when you multiply together, because remember, up here we have that 2 times 4 equals 8. So the outside ones, they multiply together to give you your a and your your a and your c. So that x times the x, all right, well that's my x squared. My 2 times my 4 gives me my 8. So in order to get a positive c, you have to multiply either two positives or two negatives, because a negative times a negative is also a positive. If we look at our b term and it says negative, you can't add two positive numbers and get a negative, but you can add two negatives and just get a bigger negative. So what that tells me is we're going to have the same factors. Whoops, 8, 2, 4. We're going to have the same factors as up here, the difference being now all of my factors have to be negative, because two negatives will still multiply to give me a positive, but they will add together now to give me a negative. So that's the only difference between the black problem up here and the blue problem down here. Instead of having plus 2 and plus 4, now I have minus 2 and minus 4. That's your answer. I have two more examples. Okay, now what happens when I have this negative? I have a negative c here. What is that going to change? Well, we remember, first things, parentheses. Put your parentheses. Put your x's. You know both of these parentheses are going to get an x. Now, when we factor our 15, our negative 15, we have to think, well, what do we multiply in order to get a negative number? Because we're multiplying to get that c. Well, a positive times a positive equals a positive. A negative times a negative equals a positive. But a positive times a negative equals a negative. So we know that our factors are going to be one positive, one negative. So we have to find the factors of 15. All right, well, we have 1 and 15. We have 3 and 5. One of them has to be negative. What that tells me is I'm going to have negative 1 and a positive 15, a positive 1 and a negative 15, a negative 3 and a 5, and then a positive 3 and a negative 5. All of these factor pairs multiply together to give you a negative 15. Now what we have to do is we have to figure out which of these pairs add together to give me a positive 2. Well, the negative 115, that's definitely out of it. The 1 negative 15, that's definitely out of it, right? Now, that leaves us with the negative 3 and the 5. If you subtract 3 from 5, that's going to give you a 2. What we have to figure out is which one of these, which factor set is going to give me a positive 2. There's a little cheat on this. Whatever the bigger number is, you keep that sign. So what I mean by that, 5 is obviously bigger than 3. On this set, this 5 is positive, meaning when you combine these, you're going to have a positive 2. When you combine these, the 5 is bigger, but it's negative, meaning that your b term is going to be negative 2. So our factors are going to be this positive 5 and negative 3. And remember, you can put it in whatever order you want. You could have put x minus 3, x plus 5. It's the same exact thing, doesn't change anything. But that's how you do it when that c term is negative. Last problem. And this one is one of the easier problems, but when students see it, they freak out. So we have x squared minus 4. There's no b term. There's no x. There's no x without that squared. What does that mean? Okay, well, if there's nothing there, what would be that coefficient? Oh, well, that coefficient is the same thing as x squared plus 0x minus 4. If you think about it, 0 times x is 0. You don't have to write that 0. 0 minus 4 is just negative 4, so you can leave it like this. Nothing changes as far as your steps. You draw your parentheses. You put your x's. You still have to find the factors of negative 4. Well, we already said last problem, if you have a negative c, that means your signs are going to be a positive and a negative. So we're going to have 1, 4, and we're going to have 2 and 2. I mean, if you want to put both of them, you can. Okay, so we're going to have a negative 1 and a positive 4, a 1 and a negative 4, a negative 2 and a positive 2, a positive 2 and a negative 2. Well, which ones of these are going to add together to give you 0? It's obviously not going to be the 1 and the 4, but the negative 2 and the positive 2, that's the route it goes. That's your answer. Hopefully this video helps you understand when you're factoring, and A is 1. These are the easiest kinds of factoring problems there are. It helps you understand how to solve that. Now, if it doesn't factor nicely, there's something called the quadratic formula that you can use to find your x's. If you're working with graphs, to find your x-intercepts, you can find your roots, your zeros. They call it a bunch of different things in different books and different worksheets. But this is how we factor for for x when a equals 1, and hopefully that helps you out.